Welcome to the Untrended podcast, where we lift the lid on extraordinary ideas about business. I'm Nicole Jones, and with me are Billy Hamilton-Stent, Chief Strategy Officer, Jamie Fewery, Creative Director, and Shiri Wolff, PR Account Manager. Today, we're exploring what AI tools like ChatGPT are doing to our brains. It's already clear how AI tools are changing the way we work, but it's going to take a little while longer before we understand how they're impacting our minds. Is it all part of a natural evolution of how we use tech? Or are we building up some long-term problems? By the end, we hope to uncover a few answers and maybe spark a few more questions about the real impact of AI. But first, to kick us off, we're going to start with a segment called Trend or Trash, where I'll throw out some of the latest trends we're seeing in the world of business and ask our guests to let us know whether it's a genuine trend or genuine trash. Here we go.
The first trend is fully AI-created ads.
Discuss.
I think, slightly regrettably, trend. I think while pre-Christmas Coca-Cola did a big one, it was a kind of a big splashy news story. I think at the very top end of advertising, it's probably trash and it's a flash in the pan kind of thing, because I think things will kind of regress to some sort of norm. But I think the amount of content that is produced, we will see many, many, many fully AI-generated ads. Remember, we're still yet to see Sora released by OpenAI, which will change the game. Some of the tools we use can do small 10-second clips of video. Someone said the other day, AI at the moment is the worst it ever will be. Right now, it's only going to get better. So I think as we see stuff like Sora come to market, fully AI ads will probably become a trend and a norm.
It's happening, and we don't have to like it, but I think it probably is a thing. I mean, I don't hate seeing things that are AI generated. I just don't love it either on an emotional level.
That's why I think at the very top end of the industry, whether you are trying to provoke an emotional response, I think it will regress back to the norm of using real things, real people, real objects, and AI will be a bit of a flash in the pan there. But for the kind of fat middle of content ads that are produced.
What, like B2B advertising?
Exactly. There's going to be a lot of it, unfortunately.
And the second trend is AI has become our new brainstorm partner. Thoughts, feelings?
I feel trend. I mean, my old brainstorming partner was Jamie Fewery, and now I can just do it in a much more effective and efficient way. So
You've upgraded. It's always there. They don't rock in at like 10 a.m.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a partner as such. I think it's certainly a tool, the way we use it at the moment. But I don't tend to use it in a conversational style. I think maybe this one comes down to personal preference about how you use things. I don't tend to put things in and ask for responses back and then workshop with the tool. I ask it to do things that I need as output.
That sounds like a partner. That's pretty much what I have going on in my marriage. I just sort of ask for things and then they get done or they don't get done.
But brainstorming is a weird thing, isn't it? Because there's a kind of organic, unpredictable nature to it. And I don't know if it can necessarily replace people.
But do you not just find it's useful for like sparking off? Because I'll just put random crap into it and then it just takes me in different directions, and it's not something I necessarily would get from another person who, you know, the problem with me and you talking is that we tend to think in quite similar ways, and whereas this often gives me something that I think, even if it's rubbish, I'm like, oh, that's so different.
It's where your brainstorm bar is set, isn't it? Like if you're on your own, needing to hustle up a couple of ideas sharpish.
Yeah.
It's great. If it's like the big brainstorms where everyone brings their their game face.
Yeah, there's snacks in the middle.
Yeah, all that. That I don't see it's so much of a trend, but hacking for short-term ideas, definitely a trend. I mean, everywhere, probably far more so with clients than we, like to admit. But proper brainstorms with chocolate in.
My favourite part of a brainstorm is actually to get up and move around the room and like stick a post-it note on the wall. And obviously you don't really do that with AI. So in that sense.
I wonder then if it's trend, not trash, but it's one that I've missed, as with so many trends. I've just kind of
carpenter.
Bring your own level of engagement into this, because there would be no trends. This would be trash only. I think trend. I think we're going to lock that on trend. Right. I'd just say as a footnote, there's still a big place for chocolate-focused 80% of the conversation being irrelevant, but coming up with that sweet nugget, game-changing idea that is here to stay.
And the final trend is AI replaces sales development reps.
I think it depends what you're selling. If you're selling, we're currently working with a company that sells kind of complex electronics systems. Don't know if it's going to do that. At the sharky end of sales, all day long. All day long, I reckon.
Well, I just think that salespeople are so variable in themselves, but sometimes you have a delightful experience and sometimes you're like, wow, this could have absolutely been a robot and we would have been better off all around.
I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a lot of sales that depends on relationship building and nurturing those relationships. There's a lot that doesn't, and there's a lot where those relationships are actually harmful to the sale. There's a friend of mine worked in an agency a while ago, and they were working with a large car manufacturer. And one of the insights they came up with in doing a lot of research was that women in particular find it really uncomfortable to go into dealerships because they find the sales environment really pushy, pressured, and they find that the salespeople don't respect them. So they used AI and they used smart tools to kind of disrupt that sales process, that it could all be done online and through virtual agents, and it worked. I think that end of sales, absolutely.
That's interesting, because I would have put it down to a financial cutoff. You know, I think there's probably a limit at the amount of money that I'm willing to spend without engaging on a person. I don't know what that limit is.
Well, the data said
$20,000.
up to 50,000 quid is an e-commerce transaction in B2B these days.
And these cars, well, I would say in the 50 grand.
That's a consumer thing, though, just as a...
consumer.
Yeah, that's quite a hard... That's a big purchase for a consumer. For a company, probably less.
I mean, has anyone seen it in B2B? I don't tend to make large B2B transactions, so it's hard for me to say.
Seen?
You know, customers being really willing to just engage with like an AI salesperson rather than...
Oh, I don't know if they're that prevalent yet. I think of the SDR, I think if I understand SDRs right, that's like the person who phones you up after you've downloaded an ebook and says, hi, you've just downloaded an ebook. At that level, you're going to get a lot of that cut out, which is why I think it's definitely a trend where you'll see less of that kind of sales hustle. But at the other end, where you sit down, have a coffee and talk about if you're going to buy a 3 Series or a 5 Series, no, maybe not.
I would like one day to be a B2B decision maker who is like getting taken out for drinks and dinner. So for that reason, I hope that it continues. I hope that, you know, SDRs don't get
SDRs
taken out
become drink and dinner DDRs. There you go. So it's definitely a trend, but there's a whole new market opening up in whining and dining as a result.
Okay, it's time to get into the meat of this episode. First, we're looking at whether AI is a productivity booster or a crutch. Are we relying on it too much for our day-to-day tasks? Billy, what do you reckon?
I think there is a natural waterline around where you don't use AI. I don't know how inbuilt everyone's AI kind of benchmark is, but I use it in a structured way, a fair bit, but only in very specific, tasks where I need to structure information really quickly, or I'm looking for hacks around research, or we're doing large scale projects and some of the kind of groundwork in that needs to be expedited. But if I feel like I'm doing it a bit too much, like it's
so
like going to the bar, isn't it? Like I'm at like 2 pints and I've got to get home for tea, rather than I'm just going to smash this till the wheels come off.
See, this is the thing. I would like to say I'm using it in a really structured, considered way, but there's a real strong correlation for me between I'm tired and it's the end of the day and I
need to go to the pub.
And I need to go to the pub and I need to do something quickly.
Right.
I find that I use it very little when I am energized and feeling sparky and having a kind of...
Which is most of the time.
Mentally good time, yeah. Most of the time pre-11 a.m.
Yeah.
But then as the day goes on and I need to rattle up some ideas, I find myself leaning towards it a little bit more, which is worrying, I think, because it's, like when you hop in the car to go 5 minutes down the road. It's the sort of equivalent of that.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? Like, it's just that thing in the corner. You're like, it's shiny. I could use it. I should use it respectfully. But actually, it's just a slippery slope from there.
Yeah, I find I have quite a structured and disciplined way of using it. And it tends to be I use it for things that either I can't do or I can't get readily elsewhere out in the world. So in creative, a lot of what we do is, developing visual identities and images and that kind of thing. And there's such in the ideation process, there's such a heavy reliance, or there was such a heavy reliance on stock photography that doesn't quite do what you need it to, and using reference to get across that point instead. The tools are now so good that we are able to put in the exact photo we want and get it back from an AI and use that in key visuals to sell into clients. And then that informs what you need from a photo shoot. It's allowed us to be a lot more specific in that and really tailor those presentations to clients in a great way. Tend to use it less for bouncing around ideas and that kind of thing. tends to come slightly after that stage. Like, we've got a territory we want to work into, we've got an idea. How do we start bringing it to life? So I didn't really ask it for like, how would you do this? Write a narrative, write some taglines. It's more really establishing that visual identity, and that, I think, in an agency setting is huge because it's such a time saver, because you don't have to do picture research, you don't have to bother a designer. You can use these tools that give you something back within 30 seconds, and then you can refine it from there. So that tends to be where the structure of my use.
So I would never want to use it for a creative territory. I think once you start to get into the game of give me 3 ideas for a campaign, that is the highway to hell, because they're inevitably naff. And then if you're kind of stuck in that mindset of, well, these are the things that I've got in front of me, it's going to go to a bad place.
And I also think, actually, sometimes I have said, what are the natural creative routes for this kind of brief, and then to rule them out. Because if you put it in, you're like, that's obvious, so that goes. So we have to avoid this area because we're looking for white space, we're looking for something new and something different. That is quite useful. So you kind of use it almost as a negative prompt, I'd say.
It's easier to like know what you don't want rather than what you do want. Yeah. Almost like selectively getting rid of things.
Yeah, and the 1 or 2 times I've kind of used it to provide an output, I've ended up redoing it anyway because I've not been quite satisfied with it. And it's like you start chipping away at it, and eventually you've kind of destroyed the whole thing and just done it again yourself.
That's why I like the analogy of getting in a car or walking. I'm reminded of taking my little one to ballet on a Saturday, and there's a window where if you leave it too late, you just end up in a traffic jam outside Morrison's with a very frustrated little kid next to you because you've committed to the car, and now the car's stuck and you can't just get out and abandon it. And that's just like AI going iffy when you ask it for an idea.
This is it. I think you have to have this constant question of yourself of like, what am I doing something that's MRZ or aspirin? That's a different conversation.
That's another conversation.
You have to ask yourself, what am I seeking to get from this experience? So obviously if it is just like urgent speed, the presentation's due in 5 minutes, then I guess. But in terms of, that ongoing feeling of moral goodness that I've walked my kids to ballet on a beautiful Saturday morning and everyone's going rich.
This line.
Yeah.
It's going to do the job, right? I know,
yeah.
It's a marketing agency, so we've got eyes on profit and efficiency and those kind of things. But if you work in a role that is ostensibly within a creative business, you have to enjoy the creative process. And if you're happy to kind of outsource that all the time, then you probably don't enjoy it enough to be doing it, is my view. So I think if you love it and you love doing it and it's intellectually stimulating, you want to be involved in it. And I think that's the kind of boundaries I put around AI.
It's also not just about, agency, you're right, not just about creative, right? So it can save time, and I think it saves time everywhere. We did a bit of analysis of our year of AI with our little plug for Otto here, but our very own B2B trained, love him or hate him Otto. And it definitely saves time. I don't think it improves the creative output of our agency a smidge, really, but it saves time with some really practical things. We're talking about, I thought a really good one was like writing a brief. Writing a brief is a really important part of the creative process. It's also can be a bit labor intensive. If you can save some of that time and, with a bit of, luck and the following wind, AI can get you there. That's contributing, isn't it, to a better, everyone wins.
Exactly. It's like, in the image sense, like, you could either have creatives spending 2 or 3 hours trawling through Getty Images and Shutterstock for a photo that fits and actually won't fit what they want because it will be imperfect and it will look like stock. Or you can use a tool that gives them the exact photo they want. And then you can use that, and then that informs what you sell.
But that's your... Oh, there you go.
No, I was going to say, I'm interested, Shiri, in how you're using it in PR, in the sense that something that you guys have to do a lot is capture the tone of voice of very different people. Obviously, you're writing on behalf of named stakeholders and spokespeople. How are you finding it for that?
I think with AI, it's very samey. Obviously, you feed it what you want and then it brings it out. It's really hit or miss. Like reviewing content that comes from different people in my team, you do really pick up on patterns. And Jamie, to your point about, yes, and Billy as well, actually, it saves time, but also who's looking at it. So for images, if you want it to convey something to a client, perfect. But when it goes across to a journalist, like the level of critique is so different to the point where now we get journalists telling us we don't want AI. Don't send it to us in pictures. Don't send comments that are AI fueled just because they can tell. It's becoming so samey.
They got a good sense for it then. They kind of pick up on it.
Oh, 100%. Drive.
Everyone's wise to it now, aren't they? I think with images as well. That's why for ideation, it's great because it shortcuts a few things.
Yeah.
Above the line, you almost get called out.
In ideation, it creates a brief for a photo shoot or something like that. This is the kind of style we want to capture. And actually, funnily enough, we're going through that situation now, having generated some AI images as prompts. We're now casting a film based on those images, and that there is complexity within that as well.
Seeking actors with 6 fingers.
Yes, exactly.
There's a big thing now, if I can put my strategy hat on and move it away from creative a smidge, where the idea of what they call synthetic data. So in B2B, big problem is a lot of your data sets are a bit small, a bit clunky. So you don't get this luxury of like consumers doing things every second of every day to base insights on. So if you're in the, pick your anomalous but old school sector, how do you get effective data from that? And from what I've seen of some of the stuff that's out there, the synthetic version of that, where effectively you're training AI to do its best guess at what anyone might think, feel, what trend might happen, to shortcut a whole planning process, is pretty good. But I think then that starts to mess with your head because it's a proxy, it's a facsimile of actual information. And that's a more complicated thing than that an image is generated.
Yeah.
And it's an AI image and you can put something at the bottom that says it is and you get a sense of that. With data, it's a much harder thing to unpack, We know that this is probably about right, but also I know that it's a synthesized view of what's out there from a...
Do you have to flag it? Do you have to, because there's a moral aspect to data, I suppose.
We're not using synthesized data in anger right now, but I think you would, same as anything else. You have to make the decision based on... Well, the thing is, in B2B, a lot of data is just not very accurate. So this is... so that's the point. It's not like... it's not you're going from like a benchmark of excellence, which I think in creative, actually, you probably are, right? So good creative product is good creative product. That's that. And it's can AI reach that standard? Maybe not so
This
much
is the thing that I'm really intrigued about strategy. Not to, shower you in glory, Billy, but obviously you've got many years of, using your brain to figure things out.
Being ignored by pretty much everyone.
Yeah. And I just really worry and wonder, how do young strategists get good at the job of strategy? Because I think strategy, more than anything else, you really have to have done the hard yards, whilst you are no longer, hopefully, in the position of like really sifting through data to, produce tables for a deck. You could do that if you had to. You could go in and do it.
I could produce tables.
So how do you make sure that young people are actually developing?
Well, and that's it. What's happened is you end up, it can be really useful because, again, that, let's take someone who's got like a couple of years experience under their belt. They can probably produce something from a strategic point of view that quicker by allowing the model to generate outputs, right?
But how do they know that it's good? Because it's those years that give you...
Well, because then you have to build in, because again, no one's going to do it on the sly and say, I've just spent 3 days putting this thing together. Actually, it took me 10 minutes. So you
say no one's going to do it on the sly. Have you met people? People are absolutely...
Everyone will do it on the sly. Yeah, that's true. Everyone will do it on the sly, but not me, of course. You go into the information the AI's, the model's pushing out and use that as the reference point. So weirdly, it can make it easier in terms of like learning and development, because what you're actually interrogating, rather than something someone's done, which can get a bit like, you say this, I say that. It's, well, this is what the third party, Hyperborg has said. What's good about it and what's not? And you have to then sort of reverse the learning into it. But it's not the same as, the hard yards. It's the same with PR, right? So with PR, there's always that pain barrier you've got to push through. I think with like, you've got to know the journo networks, you've got to know the news media, you've got to know what a sales pitch is, how a journo is going to, or an influencer is going to respond to that. And that I think is very intuitive, or it definitely was when I was doing it back in the day,
No, definitely. But I think it comes back to that almost skill of critiquing. So, more established people in PR will be able to critique something that AI does and goes, I don't like that bit, that won't resonate well. But you see new execs come in or new PR people come in and they just don't have that because they've known nothing else.
It's taste, isn't it?
It's taste, but it's also this level of just experience and the critique. And I think that's going to be more of an issue. So you'll have to
learn faster.
We had a job interview the other day where the candidate said pretty clearly, just so as you know, this is all GPT, and I think it's about right. And I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah. No, we had that recently, and my sort of initial reaction was like, "Oh, that's terrifying that you've said that." And then I was like, "Is that like being terrified that someone's used a mobile phone or something.
Yeah.
Because
is this the same as people getting worried 30 years ago that there was a trend of people not wearing ties in the office? And this, just because that, I'll never forget being in a brainstorm with some fellas from a Japanese laptop manufacturer years ago. It's the first brainstorm we'd ever done. And our CEO had said, the great way to get people to relax in a brainstorm is just get to take their tie off. It's sort of, here we are, guys. We're just going to,
Let it around their head.
like a wedding. And so we went into this brainstorm. We're like, okay, guys, so before we get going, we're just going to take our ties off. We all had ties on because that's what you did in a client meeting back then. And they all looked at us like, their ties on, and we just sort of went, oh, okay.
I do think it's slightly different to the fears over mobile telephony or something like that, or office culture changes, because none of those things, and I think Nick's written about this in the magazine, really impacted critical thinking in the way AI does.
This is it, yeah.
And I've written about this as well before. You only know that something is good if you've done it before.
Exactly.
So there's trends at the moment of people using AI to write books. And those books will, I guarantee you, be awful because the people doing it have never written one. So they don't know what good looks like. I think you can carry that down to any level. I think if you, to your point, Shiri, if people are coming in having known nothing else, they don't know what good is.
Exactly.
And therefore you will never get good out. So I think you have to, there is a little bit of hard yards, whatever you want to call it, particularly when you're writing long form copy or something like that. You have to know how it feels and what it feels like to put something in and get something out again before you can accurately critique what an AI gives you. And I think that, for me, is what separates it from other technologies. Because most other technologies, they save you time, they make you smarter. This one is definitely saving you time. There's a question mark over whether it's always making you smarter.
This is my ultimate analogy that I keep coming back to, is that in the 20th century, when we started figuring out how to really, give it welly with natural resources and oil and gas and all of these things, it was like, wow, we can really supercharge society by using all of these things. And now it's 70 years later and everything's up the spout in terms of the planet and the climate. And I do just worry a little bit, but because the long tail of cognitive decline will be slow, it will just be productivity, speed. And then 50 years' time, we're all just sort of dribbling on the sofa and nobody can put a solid thought together anymore.
I actually think it's moving faster than I think. I speak to teachers who say that young kids are not able to write as well as they did because they're already using it. It's already the thing. And teachers, a bit like journalists, can pick up on AI-generated content. They can smell it a mile off. But it's not stopping it becoming a trend. People go for the easiest option, right? Particularly if you're young and you want to go and do something that isn't writing a 800-word essay on Charles Dickens, you will use that resource. But it is...
Conversely, on that point, I get it. And it's the same as that, spelling's gone up the Swanee, which is the annual, kind of moan from the industry when the new wave of grads come in or whatever. In terms of education, so at my kids' school, they've got a bot that will, a kind of crossover between history and politics. The other day, they asked Hamlet and Ophelia to talk about who was going to win the US general election.
Wow.
Right.
Interesting.
So, and it was cool. I mean, it was really cool.
Yeah.
Something that would have, if you'd have taken two of the kids listening to that, said, would you just mind knocking up a bit of Shakespearean prose around this political issue? They could do it, but it'd take them 3 months, and for what ends. So there's lots of layers to it, aren't there?
And that's exactly it. That's valuable because that's interesting and it's something that's not been done before. And there is no way of what we were just saying about knowing what good looks like. No one's going to know what good looks like in terms of what Hamlet would have made of the US election. So it's completely new. But it's when I think in our world it's probably most keenly felt in PR land. When you're writing an article, you've got to know what a good article looks like before you publish it.
But I think that's about training and experience, and you just have to recalibrate that, or it will just, I don't think you just sit there and go, right, okay, let's rethink how we train things. It's a response to the...
agencies aren't going to say no AI. People come in having, used AI at school, uni, personal lives coming in. They're going to want to use it. They are going to use it. So it's almost retracing your steps and trying to teach people core skills when they're so much further along. It's going about it the other way round.
Yeah, the basics.
I think it's actually that they should use it. To grab to it, and it can save time. And we're in the business of efficiency as much as anything else. Maybe the thing is discipline as well. It's maybe you do the first draft and then you ask the AI, what would this editor of this magazine make of this pitch? that's maybe the way you do it. So, and then as you develop your career, you become more experienced and you feel like you've actually got that skill locked, then you can start to lean on it a little bit more. But certainly in early careers, there is a necessity to kind of go through the pain a little bit. Like when I worked in more of a copy first role, one of the things I used to say was everyone benefits from like a really good red pen, like getting something torn apart, like absolutely torn apart.
But this is the thing as well. You need somebody to give you the time to tear it apart. I think the other thing about like everyone is so desperate to be more productive and more efficient, and everyone is so busy, but it's actually really hard as a manager to make sure that you have sufficient time in your day to feed back to people, to interrogate their work, to challenge their thinking, and not just be a thing where I think agencies fall down is, but because you are always going towards a deadline, it's always, this has to go over by 5 p.m. So you get the work in and you look at it and you think it's wrong, but I'm experienced, so I can make this better quickly. And then you just fix it. I'm sure you've done that, Billy. You've received work and then you've just kind of changed it 5 minutes before you hand it back to the client.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But this is the thing. You actually have to, more than ever, go through that process of sitting down with people and being like, here's how you would structure this, and do more explicit teaching. I think whereas 10 years ago, you probably could have got away with, sitting next to someone all the time and kind of learning by example.
All the time that's being saved in producing the outputs is actually being consumed in retrospective or more deliberate and explicit training at the other end. There's like there's a meta resource that cannot be changed. Bear in mind as well that we're talking about large language models here, and that's not the only part of AI. I was reading the other day about how McKinsey were talking about since GPT's 12 months. Is it 12 months? I think it's probably 13 months since it came out in November.
Bit long.
2023. Yeah. So in December 2024, that's a year. And obviously usage has gone from something like, of large language models, something like 15, 20% up to like 60, 70% in businesses everywhere. So that's a kind of, it's business people's usage of it. So it's gone like that, proper hockey stick stuff. But that will then cap out. And I think a lot of the things we're talking about will start to sort of equalize. But AI overall, using your phone, using media analytics, algorithms, whatever, that's all,
I'm absolutely the wrong person to describe this, but I went to a Google Cloud talk where they were showing about how they're using AI to identify or construct proteins or something like that. Clearly, I'm not a scientific person. I don't have the language to cover this, but basically like medical modeling, but would have taken like some poor sod, a year of their life to just get this one protein. They can now do it super quick, and they've like modeled millions of them, and that's an amazing medical advancement. So very, very different area.
Yeah, us in the media world, we worry an awful lot about protein. Large language models.
I worry about protein. I've heard it's the route to weight loss.
120 grams a day or something like that.
Is that it?
Actually really hard to do.
Yeah, especially this time of year.
Large language. Us in media, we worry a lot about large language models. But as you say, the great challenges of our day, climate change, medical advancement, those kind of things will be, solved hopefully by smarter use of AI. So I think it becomes
apart from that whole bit about like every time you write an email with ChatGPT, it uses a glass of water or something.
Yeah, we're not helping there.
Does it use a glass of water?
Yeah, it uses.
They must need to go to the toilet a lot at the end of the day.
That's another concern about like corporate social responsibility and the use of AI. We don't even touch on that really, but we know it's hugely energy intensive. That's another thing that we don't really bear in mind when we use these things.
So are we saying AI is a massive winner? Productivity, ideation, all of that, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost? Or are we saying it's good, but we're finding our way?
I think,
or it's actually we're all going to hell in a handcart.
I think we're good. We're finding our way. I saw you'll very rarely hear me say this, but I saw an interesting LinkedIn post. Really simply,
wow! Please share that with Brooke when you get a minute.
That was from someone working in the ad industry that compared AI to stuff like Web3 in the metaverse. That was like all the rage about 2 years ago. Everyone couldn't stop talking about it, and really has come to not much at all in terms of day to day. I don't think that's quite a fair comparison. I think it will have far more impact than that. But I think you're right. There will be a leveling out. There will be a point where the excitement fades, as you say, we're like 13 months in or whatever to mass use of large language models. There will be a point where it levels out. We find an equilibrium with it. We find what it's right for, what it's wrong for. We've already tried to write guidelines. They probably need updating on the fly as each new technology comes out. but it will find its place. And I think it's still finding its place. And I think any kind of attempt to say this is what it's used for and this is what it does is doomed.
Can I run past you? Run past you.
Run past you.
Can I run past you now? No, can I run past you my media soundbite for AI?
Go for it.
As we're in a media environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So AI is like sand on the beach.
Gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere, but no sand, no seaside. I think the first half's good.
Yeah.
But I think the second part needs to...
Yeah.
If you were to say that in the voice of Brian Cox.
AI is like sand on the beach.
No, Brian Cox not.
Oh, no, I've gone a bit of that. I've got a words and grommet.
I know, that is
I've
out.
gone, what's Brian Cox saying? Oh, God, look at the universe. Things can only get better. He played the keyboards on that, didn't he?
Did you?
Yeah.
You make sure you keep all this in.
AI is like sand on the beach. Yeah, I am Alan Bellett. Maybe they're the same people.
Well, I don't want to cut across this levity, but my AI media soundbite is that I think it's going to fray the fabric of how we think forever. So that's I'm pretty hardcore. And again, I'm not anti-AI. I use it all the time, but I just think the thinky is in danger.
Okay.
And I love the thinky. So I want us to protect and nurture what's happening to our brains.
The thinky's in danger.
Yep.
Any more belters?
I don't have have you got a belting analogy, Shiri, up your sleeve?
Not to that
standard. This side of the room does only an belts. You've got the analogies now.
This is the dynamic.
Can you give us sage-like extension of those analogies just to close?
I really hate sand on the beach because it gets all over my car.
Over your car?
Yeah, well, when the kids get in the car after they've been on the beach, there's sand bloody everywhere.
Okay, I think it's worse in most problematic in a sandwich.
Yes.
That's where I really lose faith in sand, when you find it in a, ham.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be. Especially when you've just...
If that's where AI ends up ruining my ham sandwich, I'm out. I'm back to the drawing board.
That's fair.
That is fair.
Okay, now we head into our final segment, Mailbag, where we tackle your burning questions. I'll pull a question out the bag and give it to our guest to take on. They'll have 90 seconds to give their take. Okay, so I'm going to grab the mailbag. Have a dive around inside.
It's very exciting.
I feel like, that bit in Harry Potter where Dumbledore's like pulling the names out. It's like, Harry Potter. Right, it's not about Harry Potter, sadly. Jaguar unveiled a pretty wild rebrand recently. Everyone is talking about it. How should I be thinking about my own B2B big swing? Ooh, contentious.
So, putting aside my own personal opinions on the Jaguar thing, which, I neither love it or hate it. I'm probably the only person that thinks that way. What I do like about the attitude behind it is they had a hunch and they backed it. I think, B2B is always kind of tarred with the brush of being a bit conservative and a bit risk averse. And what I like in recent B2B brand activities is they've had an idea that may feel very different, may feel very bold, and they've backed it and they've gone in on it. I think, lots of people talk about the Workday Rockstars campaign. That could have fallen flat. I think the idea of saying, we back this, we think this is a good idea. We think this will help us stand out in a crowded market and be very different and rise above the waterline of B2B to, kind of public awareness. That's really great. So while Jaguar might not have worked for their core market, I like the idea that they've lent into something that they think is a good idea and they're not backing down on it. So if I were a B2B brand going up to a brand moment, I would think the same thing. Back your hunch. Go for it.
I think it's also a timing thing as well. So they've really managed to drip feed it. So, it started off with this really weird ad that no one really got. Elon Musk was like, do you even sell cars? Like, what do you do? Then it went to a Miami event where they unveiled the car, but it's only being launched at the end of 2025. So they've gone through like a really long launch process that I think a lot of people don't do. There's this urge of like, we want to get out now, we want to do a massive splash and like, that's it, done. Whereas they've gone about it a bit differently, at least from a PR perspective. I think that's something we don't see as much. So, I think the timing was very, very interesting.
My sense on it, regardless of what you think about the actual rebrand, is that I really like that it doesn't feel like a decision by committee. And ultimately in B2B, I think that's where a lot of branding or just marketing campaigns in general goes wrong, is when you have such decision by committee, you end up with a sort of lowest common denominator product that doesn't really achieve anything or make any sort of splash. So love it or hate it, I really love that it is a position and clearly someone is making an executive decision to be like, this is where we're going.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a big piece of research that talks about how groups make decisions. And in B2B, that happens a lot. And the headline of that is that when groups make decisions, they make the lowest risk decision because no one wants to screw up. And I think that's a big drag factor on creativity in B2B. So it's good to see, even though it's technically, I guess, a B2C campaign, Jaguar, someone putting their neck out. I totally agree that someone has stuck their neck out and gone, right, we're going to do this. And we're all talking about it. So the fact it's a question is a win, really. I guess you just got to hope that a lot of people in marketing want to buy Jaguars. Interestingly as well, on the radio, they were talking about how the price point might not be quite right. They're going into like a expensive car from a somewhat expensive car market. And I think that's another part of the brand conversation that we miss, which is it's the shop window can be, as disruptive as you like, but if the roots of the strategy aren't right, you're going to come unstuck regardless. But I'm all for sticking your neck out. We have this thing we said, don't we, about the school disco effect, which is basically, for people who haven't heard it before, when you go to a school disco, you think you want to stand out, right? Until the point where you stand out so much that everyone thinks you look like a dickhead.
Oh, that's just given me a real powerful cringe through my entire body.
Right. So when I was wearing those gold lame trousers because I wanted to feel like, the business, but I ended up going home early, in tears. It's just a personal scar that I need to share. That's what B2B is. We all think we want to go to the disco and stand out, but actually, especially in B2B, we all just want to be dancing to Come On Eileen at the end with our mates.
Didn't you wear a bright red suit to our Christmas party last year?
I did, although, of course, it wasn't last year or the year before. It was many decades ago now. But it's still talked about. You still talked about,
Well,
that's
blocked that from my memory entirely.
$17.99 on Amazon, including the tie. Yeah.
Jaguar rebrand, like Billy's red suit.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're all for it, wouldn't you say? I think that's a kind of
lean into it.
Yeah, lean in.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Untrended podcast. We hope our deep dive into what AI is doing to our brains sparked a few new questions about where creativity and critical thinking fit in a world driven by AI. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to hit subscribe or follow where you're listening so you don't miss out on our upcoming episodes, where we'll keep unpacking extraordinary ideas about business. And if you have ideas or questions for us to tackle, send them our way using the link in the description of this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Untrended podcast. See you next time.